All right, we are on for ready for the next one of exactly what you just said, Gerald, of learning something new so we can apply it into our
Bring it
own.
on.
Hello, everyone.
Got Sheela, Rahman, and geometric frequency coherence. There we go. That was a mouthful. Or plasmoid unification frequencies to coherent geometry. She explains it much more elegantly, so I'm gonna shut up. And everybody, if you haven't seen this yet, prepare to have your minds blown.
Hello.
So happy to be here today and show what I've been working on. So my name is Sheela Rahman, and I'm a frequency researcher and sound engineer. And today I'm going to show you my analysis of the plasmoid unification model converted into a tuning system that can become a playable keyboard for musicians and scientists to analyze the frequency combinations for further research and art. So.
It for a second, because like what she just said there, creating a playable frequency chart for both musicians and scientists. It's it's pretty epic.
Yeah. Music's important.
Okay, so just a little bit of my mission, just so you know a little bit about me. So as a sound engineer, musician, and frequency researcher, it's my intention to find and map and imprint the most coherent, harmonic, and stabilized frequency unification systems that connect as deeply as possible to all unite and create a bridge between the higher and lower dimensions, and to create usable systems for scientists, musicians, healers, explorers to understand and heal from and create new technologies with sacred frequency knowledge. And the way I operate is that any numerical sequence that comes into my field is going to be converted into a tuning system, and the geometry will be observed what I do. And so some of the research I'm going to discuss with you today, first of all, starts with oscilloscopes, and then I get into the numerological ratios and sequences and how those are converted into sine tones and visualized in the oscilloscope. And I work with sine tones mainly just to understand the base units of geometry, but integrating triangle waves, sawtooth waves, square waves, and using pulsations, so an envelope on top of an envelope would create a pulse electromagnetic field, for example, which I'll get into. And then frequency combinations and 432 harmonics versus 440. I get into that a little bit. Special types of geometries, like the rose curves, which are different numbers of petals in a flower in the mathematical shape. And then I'm going to talk about the plasmoid unification model by Malcolm Bendall and how to understand the frequency coherence of that system using frequencies. So we're going to take a deep dive with all that, and at the end we'll have a lot of time for anyone to come up and play with the technology. So let's start off talking about oscilloscopes. All right, so an oscilloscope is a device used to display and analyze the waveform of electronic signals. It shows us how the signal varies over time, allowing us to see things like the amplitude, the frequency, and then the level of coherence. And it can really help us understand and visualize the sonic geometry inherent in different ratios and numerical sequences. And this knowledge can be used to mold the ether and molecules, water, different plasma fields. So I feel a moral obligation to explain the history of oscilloscopes because this is the main tool that I work with, and it's imperative to have a basic understanding of how the greedy oscilloscope is a modeling algorithm that's built to model after this machine, which is the cathode ray oscillograph. And this was the original oscilloscope. So it's an analog oscilloscope. You can still get them on Amazon or on eBay. And so the way this one works is it takes tiny electron beams and has frequencies going oscillating at different frequencies. And it allows you to visualize what's happening on the screen because of the deflection plates. So there's like an X plate and a Y plate over there on the diagram. So different frequencies will affect the shape that you see on the screen. And the one that you see on the screen of that oscilloscope, I don't know if you can see it that well, but it's a 2D oscilloscope. So the waveform looks like that. And that's called an XY oscilloscope, but we are going to focus today on XYZ oscilloscopes, which are using 3 different access points. One represents time, one represents amplitude or voltage, and one represents the actual frequency. So the way that this is translated is using the Fourier transform algorithm, which emulates the functionality of the infrared oscilloscope. So the oscilloscope really does give us an accurate depiction of what the sound is doing in its most base level electrical information state. And this is just for fun. These are some images I generated from AI of my dream oscilloscopes. So these would be if you could mold the plasma, which I already do, but I don't know how to make it emulate these geometries. But yeah, plasma oscilloscope is something some seeds I just want to plant in case anyone out there knows how to make these.
So they're not commercially available
Not yet.
in your head.
These are just,
Right.
hopefully soon though, someone can build these out.
What's the cause of the inability of this resistance to doing this?
I don't know if the technology or the knowledge exists out there in the collective field to generate a holographic plasma-based 3D oscilloscope in ether that has like 3 dimensions. Some people do lasers actually and smoke, but you have to have like 2 projectors coming at it, the smoke from 2 different angles. And yeah, so the laser exists, but the plasma, that's just like an idea that I have that I want to put out there.
Just as an aside, what did you ask the AI to do to create these shapes? Because I'm trying to imagine the song that I would like to imagine in my head that would create these shapes or something. But
Yeah, it's like the prompt is like that long, and I posted it on the internet.
Cool.
So,
I'll check it out.
yeah. Okay. So the next thing is coherent versus chaotic geometries. And this is very important also to understand the visuals. So what do we mean by stable, coherent, harmonic? So stable is the waveform is consistent, predictable, and still. So you might just see one geometry on the screen like that, but it's actually frequencies that are stabilizing that pattern into coherence. But yeah, so coherence is when they're phase one. So they have a fixed phase ratio, and that's what causes this clarity and stillness. And so stable, coherent, harmonic carrier waves are crucial in applications regarding precise and predictable output signal integrity like radios, for example. Like we need to have a very precise carrier wave on 106.5 FM if we want to send out a signal on that station. So it's super important we know how to emulate, how to generate a stable sine tone wave. So the way the radio antenna works is there's like one stable sine tone at 105.87 FM. That is used as a carrier wave, and it's coupled with the actual songs and radio hosts, and then that transmission is sent out, and the antenna will recept the carrier wave and then bring that down into the radio station. And so with the unstable inharmonic dissonant, which is the one you see on the bottom of the screen, which I'm going to give you later a demonstration on what that looks like in the oscilloscope. So that shows erratic changes and lacks consistent patterns. So even though that image is still, that one would be moving around constantly. And that's what our laptops are emitting as well. So inharmonic is composed of frequencies that do not relate to each other as integer multiples, and so they create more complex and less predictable patterns. And they look like noise, they appear rough, jagged, irregular, unpredictable, chaotic. So these waves do have a signature of destruction and ultimately should not be used as core-based building blocks in creation in musical systems like the 440 system. However, a positive function of chaotic waves could be to clear a field and destroy any stuck energy or a broken system so that it can be re-imprinted into coherence. So clearing. So some certain metal Tibetan gongs, if you look at them in the oscilloscope, they'll look like pure chaos and noise, or like the waterfall. That's going to look like pure chaotic noise, but those are positive aspects of chaos where they're clearing and they're doing different things. So it's not always coherence equals good, chaos equals bad. But as building blocks for a musical system, in my opinion, I think they should be stable from the base units, which is what the 432.
So, you said the other day when you were here that you like the key of C. Why are you using 432 instead of 512, for instance, as a carrier frequency for your harmonics?
Yeah, so the arc of my journey involved starting off with 432, and then I actually got into Indian tuning systems. So I went off of the Western 12-tone system altogether, and I started in training with these ancient Indian tuning systems. Yeah, because I really felt really deeply moved by these harmonics, and then I got into the harmonics of the plasma unification model, which creates these totally new tuning systems. So there's an infinite amount of tuning systems that one could use. So we're not bound to the 12-tone system at all, even with 432. And so yes, the standardization in general, I think, is something we could break out of. But yeah, so my journey with tonality started off with understanding the chaos inherent in the 440 system. And so this is the universally accepted tuning standard. It was introduced by the Nazis in the 1940s and pushed by the Nazi minister of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, using the tactics outlined in this article. So basically, the Nazis had
just pausing it for a second. Yes, Goldheart Guardian. We are playing. Shout out to Jordan. We are playing this video off of Alchemical Science channel, and the link is posted in the descriptions. And what Sheela's describing right here is by far the most scientifically explained / evidence, visual evidence demonstrating the actual implication difference between 440 hertz and 432 hertz for musical scaling, and what she's about to show through the geometric coherence in the oscilloscopes coming up here right now is just, it's astounding. And yeah, I'll let her go through it and then pause it again to try to break it down, because it's actually quite paradigm shifting if you truly understand what she demonstrates.
Shout out to Ezra.
Shout out Ezra. Good morning, Mindful Exposures.
Good morning.
Agenda for social destabilization on the core base level units of reality, frequency, and intuition. Their goal is to make humans less coherent, more chaotic and stressed, as less coherent equals less able to hold an internal charge and center point of gravity, and it makes you less magnetic and unable to manifest your soul's mission, and more likely to passively submit to an external offloading figure. So that was, their agenda had many arms, in different directions. Yeah, the lights been going off and on all day. I think it's because we have EMF check going. It's not around there.
It'll probably come back on. It goes off and on.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and the pinpoint moments and that was going to control the units of measurements on the whole planet. And they appointed themselves as, the heads of the organization. And it talks about this one meeting, was the turning point when the whole world was forced to adopt a standardized forward computing system. And in this one meeting, they purposefully invited all of the people who they knew they could manipulate into swaying into a certain mindset. And they purposefully did not invite very specific composers such as BurnEye, who was all about maintaining the organic harmonics from nature and ancient Greek, Indian, Chinese tuning systems. So basically they were able somehow to convince the world to switch everything to 440, which again, it does have a lot of coherence for certain notes, but as a whole unified field system, there's a lot of decoherence there that is not the best. But that being said, I just wanted to say I still love any music that's been made in 440, but it should never stop anyone from making music if they don't have the right tools, because ultimately intention is king, and we have the power to recode and re-imprint our creations with our positive intentions, and that will override whatever quantum decoherence. But now we're at the point where we're working from the micro to the macro here. So we're going back into the micro and finding all of these little broken aspects of the source code and reconfiguring everything back into harmonic alignment, like with food as well, like organic food. So this is one of a few different interpretations of the 432 tuning system. And this one is incredible. It has so many, this is like so many aspects of the source code of reality and measurements of planets and molecular spin ratios, and so many aspects of creation are nested into the system. This is the original tuning system that we've been using since ancient times, since Pythagorean tuning came about, which is based off of actual harmonics of a string resonating and dividing that string. So there's a few lines in here that I found to be debated over in 432 tuning systems. And I was curious about those differences between maybe 4 or 5 different versions of the 432 tuning system. So I set out a goal. Yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm sure there's credibility and great compelling arguments for all these different systems, but my personal goal was to find the most coherent, most stable geometries in the oscilloscope, really. So I looked through all the frequencies in all those 4 or maybe 5, like there was some by Robert Edward Grant, and there's so many different ones I got from different places. But So I kind of copied and pasted the frequencies that I found to be the most geometrically stable, which is my only concern at this point. And so far, this is what I came up with. So this is kind of like taking one D sharp sequence from here, one from there, and then I ran them all through the oscilloscope. So this is the combo I came up with. And again, it might even change tomorrow. I might find something better, but for now, this was what I was going for, and all the references can be traced.
Absolutely groundbreaking work. This girl is an absolute genius, and what a novel, like, just what she's done in looking for the most stable geometries, and what she's going to demonstrate the different coherent geometries of frequencies that she's been able to create since coming up with this system on the oscilloscope here to come. It's mind-blowing, and I can't state it enough. And got to use and now test with her different charts in our own experiments, especially moving further into the work of resonant frequencies of elements for transmutation in my electrolysis devices. But yeah.
So, Bernie, is she using the old frequencies? She says 432 instead of 440, so she's using prior to 1936.
Yeah, that's what she was saying here, and that in these couple of charts, she was showing that 432 had a mathematically and thus geometrically whole and sound. The 432, when used as the integer in all her other frequency ratios, creates a stable, unified, coherent geometry, compared to when we use the 440. It is just this scrambled, incoherent, jumbled mess of frequency distortion. And that's what she's about to demonstrate and show. And in these charts that she has up first, I believe, also comes from a bit from the Malcolm Bendel plasma unification theory or chart system as well. But that is one of the main things I look to clarify and ask her when we get the chance.
Well, hey, do you mind if I read something real quick?
Always, absolutely.
It says here in Nazi Germany, the Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, ordered in 1939 to replace the tuning fork 440 before the period of instruments were 8 hertz lower at 432. It also says in here, in order for instruments to sound pleasant when they are played together, in 1936, American Standards Association recommended that the instruments be tuned to 440. So they ruined our system by changing the tuning forks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
1,000%. And ever since then. And it's been a jumbled, incoherent mess of frequencies ever since, instead of this coherent, resonating, stable geometries that you're about to see, and resonant, right? That it's no longer a coherent, resonant frequency that we are broadcasting in all the music we make and the sounds that we play. Instead, it is a chaotic, scrambled, disorganized mess that
it's the background white noise that everybody talks about.
Yeah, and
right.
one thing
So
people don't
instead of us
understand,
all being vibrating on that same background resonant frequency of coherence, it's the exact opposite, broadcasting a jumbled, scrambled mess of incoherence. And that right there could be what took humanity's consciousness off of a telekinetic or, giant overall collective consciousness potentially.
We
Well,
were
there's
talking.
another-
We would go ahead.
Sorry, there's another part to this too. Our bones are piezoelectric. So when we turn music up to a certain level, we feel the music. Everybody knows that. And if you surround yourself with speakers, and I've tested this, I had 36 speakers in one room. In every corner, at every angle, all faced to one point in the center of the room. And then I had my chair hanging from the ceiling, and I'd just sit in the chair and I'd listen to music. Kind of like an audiophile type person, but it was just a test, right? You feel the music. So if we're at 440 and it doesn't flow properly, we're not going to feel that flow. But if we're at 432 and we're consistently doing this, I kind of wonder if our energy would. I don't know. Just thought. Right?
Absolutely, Gerald.
No medical advice whatsoever. Just sound. We're talking about sound.
You're exactly on it. When systems are in coherent resonant frequency, they are essentially quantumly connected or entwined, and thus you're speaking to each other. You're, I guess it's telekinetic or what transfer of information and consciousness or energy, right? And that's one of the main principles with your coils and resonating coils and tuning forks and just existence. But it's that the Nazis somehow overturned the system, and then they were told that the Allies won the war, except for as soon as it ended, America implemented the exact same system of 440 from 432. And ever since, it's been like that. And at the same time that they did that, they also implemented the practice of shifting the clocks forwards and backwards once a year each with this quote unquote daylight savings time, which in fact is the exact opposite effect, because it actually makes the day shorter by 2 hours as opposed to the sun setting, or I guess by an hour, as opposed to the sun setting later, right? Like it's just so unnatural, and it's these two major unnatural societal implementations that were forced on the world after World War II, but initially by the Nazis, we are told.
So check this out. Ian was talking about some kind of fraction of 9, and I didn't understand what he was saying, but he's talking about musical instruments, right? So every time that they scale them, it doesn't come out to an even number or an odd number. It comes out to a fraction after that number. So every time that they scale, you can't uniformly scale it because it's like an odd fraction that comes in after the number. So there's always a 0.00235 or whatever afterwards. And that was part of why he was building his coils the way he was doing them, because he was trying to take advantage of that. Now, I didn't use the correct terminology for that 9 thing, but there is something there with that. And it changes how all the numbers work. That's why you'll see in her numbers that work, there's a decimal place after it.
Yeah, well, Tesla said if you knew the power of 369, you could change the world. I don't know how true that is, but
it is, but it's on many dimensions, and we'll have to do a whole episode dedicated to vortex-based mathematics and the 9 code, because it's quite intense. But not dive down that rabbit hole right now. We'll get back to Sheela about to demonstrate the difference of using the 440 hertz versus 440 or 432 hertz when entering into frequency generating geometric coherence. I know that's a huge mouthful. It makes no sense until you actually see it. So I'm going to shut up and let it play.
back to a different tuning system. Like this harmonic 45/32 is a harmonic for F sharp that's really common in the Indian tuning systems. And I was like, that's a really weird number. But then when I plugged it into the oscilloscope, I was like, whoa, that's actually the most coherent geometry, even more so than this one. So yeah, so this is just a current iteration of the most coherent frequencies in the 432.
And what's the significance of 51.84?
So I just wrote that down because it was kind of close to 51.2. I mean, I have other notes that are full of course.
So I can kind of see it. So it's the 432 on the major and minor octaves from first to seventh, and then I'm not sure the other aspect of the scaling. Have to look in more into these charts because they're quite fascinating.
Correspondences of all these different measurements, like you have the 432, which is encoded into all the measurements of time, the precession of the equinoxes, the radius of the moon, the radius of the sun, and all these measurements are in that A harmonic. And Malcolm talks a lot about that as well. Yeah.
The slope angle on the grid, as well as in the thunderstorm generator.
Right, exactly. He encodes these frequencies into the thunderstorm generator. So that's one correspondence. Yeah.
Are these, as you go left to right, I mean, so you say the minor sixth, that
Yeah.
is, so what are we looking at number-wise as you go left to right? Are octaves? No.
So each
Yeah, octave.
column left to right would be the harmonic of that particular note. So if you look at the C harmonic here, so those would be all of the harmonics of C. So you play middle C, let's say at 128 hertz, and then you play one octave higher on C, and then you'll get 56.
Yeah.
So this row.
There we go. She now fully explaining what this chart is and making more sense and making a lot of sense.
Horizontally, it would be the octave of the same note, and then vertically, it would be just all the chromatic piano keys.
Why did you choose the 432 over, say, 512 if they're all resonant or harmonic to each other?
So it's a nested system. The 512 is actually in the
C.
wait, 512 is the C, but yeah, 432 is A. So why aren't they switched?
So what I mean is, so I'm a little hazy on my history that I work on.
Yeah.
So the Songs of Solomon and the harp music that was created there was supposed to be in the key of C. So, that's what I learned about Global and even predating that, some of that, wherever I heard that. I just saw, when I did to back to plant science, I was always concentrating on it. For a while, I saddled up a dead horse like the key of 8, anywhere close to 440, based on the observation that the world's doing it's generally jacked up, so why do what they do? I'll do the opposite, abstract. So it's key of C being closer to something that would be near perfect versus something that's less, which is why I found it interesting yesterday when you said, you personally cared for the Indian culture 512 frequency. So I just wonder why there was a reason that you took in your presentation, just because people are used to, they didn't even know the difference between
Yeah,
frequencies.
totally. Yeah, and I think because like the whole entire global standard is based off of 440-12 tone equal temperament. But in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, who are interested in this, the 432, when you shift all the frequencies over just a little bit, then you start seeing coherence in the geometry and the standing waves. And in the measurement correspondences between different measurements of planets, atoms. So the 432 is more harmonic, more in tune, more nested, nests us into the measurements from the micro to the macro scale.
So you mean it's like dead pitch center of your entire scale of your 32 frequencies you were talking about? Or?
So what she just stated there, if true, and what I believe she's been proving with her work, is that the 432 hertz frequency, when applied to scaling to the dimensions of the rest of proportions of the, there she was stating the heavenly bodies, the planets, and the different distances and sizes, that it actually gives a coherent scaling metric or result. I know I'm spewing out a bit of a word salad here, but continue to let it play and hopefully she elaborates a bit more.
Just key of A is.
If your A is 432, then your C is going to be 512.
Well, I know they resonate. I'm just curious on why it was a 432 versus a 512 or one of the
I
others.
play upright bass among other things, and I tune in 432, and I can feel the wood grain of the instrument.
Well, is it just because your tuning forks are set between 400 and 480?
I don't know what the reason is. When I play it,
Oh.
I can feel the wood grain, where when I'm playing 440, it doesn't feel the same.
Well,
Here's another thing,
Yeah,
it'd be very difficult to change the guitar strings. You know, I can go from 440 to 432, all right, but to make, to tweak everything up that much would be challenging.
So is that why the harps and the songs of Solomon are all the 512?
I don't know.
What in that previous?
Is that why they don't?
They may have tuned the C. I mean, they were
That's what I'm
tuned the
saying.
C to 512.
That was what I understood.
A was in 432.
I don't know any harp players, but
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Does this answer your question? I mean, because this is the 432 tuning, but you see that it's got the C sharp in there. And so,
Well, it's there. I just wondered if you were gonna advertise a frequency. Why? Yeah, I mean, it's important for people to know the difference of just a little bit of tweaking for 440. I just wondered if the harp music traditionally was 512, and Goebbels was advertising 400 to 480 and 50 and 60 hertz in Europe versus us. Why would we stick anywhere close to 440, 400 to 480? And it's not saying it's one of the frequencies, but in plants, I need 7 frequencies from the time they sprout to the time they finish. So 432 is just one of 6,
Yeah.
or 7, or
Yeah.
to me, it's just more pure. It feels more pure. So
Yeah, I have a lot more to say about that. I can get into some more of the deeper mechanics of tuning systems and why the Pythagorean tuning system is a representation of the natural resonance of molecules. We can get into that a bit later on for sure. It's a big topic. Yeah.
what is the ratio? Is that a beat measure in the yellow column?
Yeah, the yellow is super important because so if you divide 8 by 5, let's say on the G sharp minor 6, if you divide 8 by 5, you get 1.6. 1.6 becomes the base unit that's going to be multiplied. So 1.6 times 2 is now 3.2. 3.2. So the ratios, if you're looking at the calculator, yeah, it's a trip how like the ratio becomes the base unit for the tuning system. So like the next row, the fifth, 3 over 2. If you divide 3 by 2, you get 1.5. And now 1.5 becomes the base unit for the whole sequence in the G row. So 1.5 times 2 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12. So the ratio, the reduction of the ratio is what becomes that base unit that's now multiplied. And that's a trick, right? That's so interesting.
So what does that ratio? Where does that ratio stem from? I mean, like I get the math there, but.
Yeah, so that's where we start getting into like strings. And I mean, there's many, that's another like whole lecture as well of like where do these ratios come from? It's all about ratio. It's all about ratios. an atomic spin ratio is, like a whole thing you can translate into a tuning system, so, but yeah, that's, the ratios are super important, and yeah, we'll talk more about that a little bit as well. So the Rose curves. So when I started researching more about first of all, the Indian tuning system, some of these ratios that the Indian tuning systems were using were creating these geometries in the oscilloscope called Rose curves, which are actual mathematical shapes. Like if you go to Wikipedia and you type in Rose curves, this is what's going to come up. These geometries are the actual imprints of what a coherent harmonic tuning system is supposed to be doing to mold the aether back into coherent waveforms. So when we have access to frequencies, which ancient sages were able to figure out without technology, because you can just hear if something's resonating or not, and they figured it out. They cracked the codes, back before technology even existed, and now we're just kind of retracing the steps back. Oh, whoa, there's something here to this, and so yeah, so the Rose curves, my mind was blown because I couldn't really find that many in the 432 tuning system, but once I started looking into the Indian tuning systems, I found every single flower except one, which is the magical Pokemon that I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But yeah, so just to go over the way that these are mapped, again, they use polar coordinates. So the coordinate system that's used to specify the location of the point in a plane using sine and cosine functions. So basically I was searching in the Indian tuning systems for this one shape, which was the 6-petal flower, because I found every single other rose curve and I couldn't find the 6-petal flower. And so then I was like trying all these different combos and I couldn't find it. And then finally I converted the plasmoid unification model into the tuning system, and then I found it. Yeah, and that geometry, I think it's a good name to call it the seed of light. And I don't think any, conversation on sacred geometry could be complete without referencing these magical shapes on the back one called rose curves. Because these are perpetual motion geometries that when you look at them, trace them with your eyes, you can perpetually move through them. The seed of life has applications in a particular plane of reality. The seed of, which I would say is more physicality, the seed of life. That's what you see in all the New Age stores, all the car bumper stickers, the seed of life. The seed of light, which I came up with that name the other day, I think it's working more on the etheric planes. Like you can trace the flow patterns with your eyes and your finger, which is a mandala, a labyrinth of perpetual motion energy that has many applications. You can use it to imprint water, and
Sure.
it's just,
So, I'm sorry, so what frequencies or ratios generate that?
So I can tell you the exact frequencies is 3. So the particular ratio is 5.
Five.
Like 5.
To
5
to 1.
Yeah, it's 5. And the 2 frequencies are 303. I can pull it up in a minute and show you that.
303.
3.25 and 1,518.75. And the way I got those numbers was from the plasma unification model. I forget which line right now. I think it was 15. Maybe not actually, but I'm gonna pull it up and show you guys in the oscilloscope in a bit. But yeah, so the 6-petal flower is that geometry I was searching for. I was only searching for it because I couldn't find it because I found everything else so easily, and I was like, why can't I find the 6? So then, yeah, I was really excited when I found that. And
What inspired you to do the overlay of the 6 pedal inside the other?
yeah, because it, I just did that yesterday. Like I just overlaid it in Photoshop because I was like, okay, the inner part of the flower is looks the exact same. Only difference is that this one is just overlapping circles on top of each other, and that one is using different curves. So I was just curious. I was like, what would they look like if you overlaid them exactly on top of each other? And you get to see what life's like. So yeah, I just did that yesterday.
They're like infinity symbols.
Yeah, exactly. And infinity is one of the most important sexual motion symbols. I have a whole slide on the infinity symbol as well. But yeah, these are just seeds of light to imprint into your consciousness. All right, now we're going to get into the plasmoid unification model. And yeah, so the plasmoid unification model is a model of unified field theory that quantifies and qualifies the inherent connection between all layers of reality. So plasmoids are donut or toroidal-shaped clusters of protons or electrons that once captured and placed into a toroidal orbit are capable of absorbing, storing, and releasing enormous amounts of energy present within their self-generated and structured electromagnetic containment. So this is basically all the technology that Malcolm is working out over there involves the plasmoid between mine and his research. So yeah, this is taken directly, this text right here is taken directly off of that plasmoid unification PDF that's free on the internet. So we're going to get a little bit more into detail with this energy web. So this is the legend. So you have 24 different lines. I'm going to go forward and I'll come back. So you have 24 different lines. So this is starting from 1, and then you got all these, it goes on to 24. So these are the different types of numbers that he's encoding. Measurements, all these different aspects of reality, elements, or the frequencies. So he's created a system that contains and unifies relationships between all of these measurements because they are actually all harmonic resonances of each other. And this is something like he can do a whole lecture on by himself is, how the precession of the equinox is the same measurement as, the measurement of the sun, and how all these different measurements are all resonant with each other, and the plasma unification model captured all of that information. And so me, as a person who's striving to find the most coherent geometrical forms in oscilloscope, I naturally decided to encode those numbers into frequencies and then into geometries before I even knew him. This is just what I do for fun. And I was just so surprised and blown away that you could have 32 frequencies simultaneously playing at the same time, and the geometry would remain completely coherent, stabilized, unmoving, unbroken. And when you warp just one of those frequencies, then the whole thing starts getting a little bit distorted. So that was super interesting to me in my quest. And yeah, so the way that you get these frequencies, it looks intimidating at first, but really it's just a matter of finding which number you want. So if you wanted to get number 23, you would just go to 23 right here, and then you would grab all these values on the line. So that's all I really did, is just take all those values on each line, convert each one of those values into a frequency in sine tones, and then plug all those numbers into an oscilloscope, and then observe the geometries, how coherent they were. And I mean, every time I'm not really expecting much, I still try something, and then I'll just be blown away by the results. And so that was a big deal for me as a musician. and sound engineer to find that unification. So, all right. And so, of course, like I mentioned earlier, it's about ratios, right? So first thing I asked myself after I saw how stable all these waveforms were is what are the ratios? And to understand the inner workings of any numerical sequence as a tuning system, the internal ratios need to be calculated. So when the sequence is in order, I would calculate the ratios of the sequence by well, first I start with the numbers next to each other. So taking the larger number, dividing it by the lower number, and getting that ratio. But ultimately, you can get any ratio by taking literally any two numbers and then dividing the bigger one, the smaller one by the bigger one. And if I would find a really interesting sacred geometry, first thing I would do is write down what that ratio is. Like the fifth harmonic is notorious for having a very specific geometry when you plug in the perfect fifth, which is different than fifth harmonic. So perfect fifth is 3 over 2. 3 over 2 is 1.5. So when you have one number, let's say you have the number 100. If you want to calculate the perfect fifth harmonic, you multiply that number 100 by 1.5. Then you get those two numbers, 100 and 150. Then when you take those two numbers and you convert them into sine tones, and you put them into the oscilloscope, you'll get an actual pentagram. Perfect fifth is a pentagram. It's crazy. But when you get these different specific shapes for specific ratios, it's important also to understand that there's variations of them depending on the angle you're observing, which is a whole thing. So there's
Can we pause this for a second to decompress some of it and unpack it?
Absolutely. 100%, because there's so much.
Yeah.
And welcome, Joe.
What's up, Joe?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I couldn't not chime in when I saw this come up. I was like,
Gotta be there.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. So what she's saying is really fascinating because I want to try to tie in some what she's saying and how it's relevant to like the bigger picture. So I want to draw a comparison here as to what she's saying about resonant frequency and also cymatics. Okay, and then kind of tie the cymatic effect into what that means when you're dealing with, rather than matter, you're dealing with energy and how it correlates to matter. Okay.
Oh, you're bang on. That's the exact key that is all of it, right? It's how energy becomes matter and matter becomes energy.
Right. So, what makes something elemental is depending, again, like we had previously discussed so many times, when you have dense energy consolidating in a resonant environment is deterministic of the structure in which it becomes. So, when you for instance, if you were to have the resonant frequency of quartz crystal, let's just say, let's use the easiest possible thing, silica dioxide, silica dioxide, and you were to crush it up into a powder, put it on a diaphragm membrane, and then you were to match the tone or even a derivative tone, a different octave of the powder that's on top of your diaphragm, what you'll actually get at very low amperage, okay, is you'll get the particles to align themselves into the structure in which it is. So, in that case, you would actually see those quartz crystals being made up of a 5-pointed configuration at the molecular level through the vibration of the diaphragm at the resonant frequency of that 5-pointed figure, you will actually then create a grid of 5-pointed figures. So it recreates itself on the macro scale visually, just on a 2-dimensional plane of the diaphragm. Okay, so if you stop thinking, well, dealing with actual particles of something and a literal diaphragm, and you want to think about it in terms of energy, the analogous diaphragm, so to speak, of the energy planes, okay, is the barrier between two fields. That's the membrane. Okay, so when you put coherently charged particle through that membrane at that resonant frequency, they'll actually start organizing themselves in grid with the resonant frequency.
Self-organization of materialization. Absolutely.
Exactly. But when you're dealing with it at we'll call it less dense, I guess, for simplicity, when you're dealing with it at different phases of the electrical planes, so we've kind of gone through that. You have more organized, like magnetic fields, where you have the field containing both positive and negative. It's how you get your polarization. But then if you simplify that, when you go into your static fields and your plasma fields, you're dealing with positive and negative separate of one another at that point. You could actually organize that energy by use of the resonance, to ultimately form, different localized effects based on that grid patterning. So depending on the materials that are utilized in the system will determine the structure that the energy is forming pattern wise, which also then correlates directly with the localized materials that you're using. So, usually if you're looking at the models that she's making, okay, you want to utilize, well, depending, I guess. Sorry, I'm cutting myself off in my head, but you want to utilize materials that equally hit octave with each other. Okay, because now if there's certain materials that simply do not resonate at the same type of frequencies. Okay, so you could hit resonance with aluminum.
What you are talking about specifically, Joe, and how I know you're bang on. You said silicone would be a pentagram and it's on the 5th octave, so you are 100% correct. That is how it would crystallize out. And this is the Walter Russell chart, of course, of the elemental octave scale. And what you're when you're mentioning the different, having two different, or a differential between two elements that then equals out, the goal is to get them to 0, right? So it's like if it's -2 or +2, you want to get it to equal 0, and in what you're creating in your equations, right?
Yeah, so I mean, this is why I have a very hard time even when I'm trying to present with Nathan and stuff, because it's so multifaceted, but it's all the same, which is the point. It's all you can use different octaves of material, for instance, but then you can't expect those materials, if they don't align within the same frequency band of that octave, you can't expect them necessarily to get into resonance, because there is material dissonance that occurs. So if you're running a certain frequency pattern in that's not derivative of the material you're running it through, the frequency you have to run it through. And I was saying this yesterday, the frequencies that you run through are immensely significant because, first of all, length of the wire. Okay, whether you want your wave pattern to move, so to speak, along the surface of that,
Be coherent.
or you want
You
it to
have
be fixed.
You have to have identical resonant masses, right? The atomic masses have to add up equally in the materials that you're using to have a coherent resonating system.
Exactly. If they're not divisible by one another, then there's going to be a form of dissonance. Now, not all dissonance is bad. Think of dissonance as destructive interference.
Yep.
So if what you're looking for is destructive interference through dissonance, then that's okay. But if you're looking for either constructive interference or you're looking to zero everything out, which is ideal because then that could be either plus or minus, that's the modulation of the frequency. If you could get everything to be in resonance with a sum of zero between the length of your wire, the impedance of the wire, the ratio of the size of the coil and the coil diameter, and the size of the center in which it creates. Okay, and then the materials that it's made of are all coherent, where they reach a sum of zero. Then the frequency modulation input into the system, okay, will determine your effect. It's not, and the spacing of everything is a factor. But if you could factor it out to zero, then all it is a turn of the dial this way or that way to change it all on the fly, which is the controllability of it. And that's sort of the summation of everything I've said in the 7 hours of content that I've participated in. But Sheela wraps it up because this is the binding force. Like, if you need to visualize it cymatically, because once you get that zero, once you get the input and the materials creating replica of the input, the materials, then if you just turn the dial a little bit this way or that way, it changes the entire pattern. And it's that difference, it's that change in the pattern that determines the differential of effect.
Yeah, I get square root of 2 in my plates.
Yeah.
So that's the only way they come in resonance with one another, and they act together.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I think ideally phi squared. So you look at the spiral ratio squared, and then you could always back work from that as long as everything is in alignment.
So when it comes down to the flow, what we're talking about, this coil here, I was testing the resistance on. And on the gold side, I get 0.03. And on the silver side, 0.02. Close to zero.
Very close.
And there's 36 feet bifilar wound. So there's 36 feet one way and 36 feet the other way. So
that's awesome. Now see, I don't claim to know what it is, but this stuff does have tolerance. So you can be on either side of it and still get everything you want without there being crazy anomalies and stuff. It's only really like when those margins start to compound so far that then you start having anomalous effect.
And that's purposefully how I get anomalous effects. I compound each instability, creating another instability, which in turn amplifies the whole system dynamically, right? Basically a bunch of word jumbo, which means I use every little thing I could possibly use to amplify every bit of voltage I can get out of it and every bit of current. And that's the only way it works.
I get it. It's
So
Sometimes I
though,
wonder, like, am I doing this for myself, or am I doing this to just help get it out of my head and into the ether? You know, like,
Man,
get
everybody
everybody
out of
knowing.
ether into reality, right?
yeah, that's it. It's,
Well, once it's spoken, it can't be unspoken. Once it's heard, it keeps getting heard, right? It's the kind of thing that, like you said, you get it out into the ether and you just let it spread. Because if it's supposed to, it definitely will. And everybody will get their hands on this info. And that's what we want. Everybody's perspective matters. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, absolutely. You know, in fact, I'm going to go out on the limb and say that the things that I see people doing where I'm like, oh, what's that? Like, raises that question, like, what's going on there? That just helps the better understanding of the process. Is all it does.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you see something that works sometimes and not others, and then it's like, okay, let me run this through my head and see what these variables are. And if you're going to simplify it to anything, just break it down into its component variables. And if you understand the most basic fundamentals of anything, whether, you know, anything, you know, you could look at how it moves along and say, okay, well, this is where it's broken. This is where you got to look, you know.
Very true.
Figuring out the equation that eliminates, you know, and overcomes the variables, you know, to the point where it's consistent. That's where the brilliance is, because you could anticipate all of these things, but because everything affects the other, you know, there is a give and take. So you have to work within those small tolerances. Like you were saying, it's like, it's almost zero. Well, almost zero is good enough for that, as long as it doesn't run into, you know, compounding, you know, issues down the line. Unless if sometimes you look to compound the issues and exploit that. That's sort of the nature. That's the difference between all the different potential outcomes of what the coils do.
Yeah,
And
that's what I do with my copper coils. This one's a little different. This one doesn't start resonating until it hits 1 megahertz, and then you start to see voltage, right? But it's like out of like 24 karat plated copper gold, and then or plated copper, and then it's 99% silver plated copper. So yeah, 24 karat gold.
That thing, I saw it earlier. It's literally gorgeous. And I mean, like you said, it doesn't matter that it's plated. All of it's happening at the surface. You got to remember something. You think about, you know, gauge of wire and stuff, and in your head, you're like, well, it's fatter, so it carries more. It's fatter, so it has more external surface area, so it carries more. Like, you know, so, you know, think about that too, about coil shape. If you want, you could have intercoil interaction simply by changing the shape and surface area of the coil. You could have interline interaction between the, you know, if you were to make it star shaped, for instance, like with where it's got
I got a few of them.
Yeah, if you have points and the wires of points, though, I'm not talking about the coil. I'm talking about the actual physical wire. You could actually have the effect riding the surface, but also counter interacting within the surface, while also decreasing the impedance of the line because of the surface area.
That's one of the principles that my coils are based on. That's called dichotron instability, and basically what it is two plasmatic surfaces crossing each other and acting as like an amplification, right? So
that makes sense.
Yeah, just a big word of exactly what you said. That's, you know,
I like it. I love it, and I actually just made a couple of Keshi triple solenoid Magrav coils out of 99.9% silver coated copper myself, and on top of that, they're now nano coated through electrolysis process that I've been doing. So I like the fact that you've highlighted that the effects are from the coating, what happens on the outside, not the inside. So, yeah.
Well, I build copper coils that can pick up power at 7.83 hertz, right? This thing will not pick up power at anything less than 1 megahertz at all. And I only get 1 volt. I hit 3 megahertz, I only get a volt 0.8. So that tells you something as to the frequency of the elements that you're using as to what you're trying to do. You know what I mean? So if I'm trying to create power or excess power, I'd use copper. I wouldn't use this. This has a different purpose.
I just had a little bit of a intrusive thought that it's like, if it doesn't go out now, it's never going to. But
what do you mean? The power, You mean like power outside the coil, you mean?
No, it was okay, yes. But not in the sense that you're probably thinking, because like I said, it was intrusive thought, which means that it's connected in my mind, but maybe not apparent.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. See, if I put a ferrite core on the outside of a copper coil, I pick up energy, but you can't do it with this one. But this coil has a completely different purpose that we can't talk about online.
So here's my intrusive thought. If you have aluminum coated in graphene, okay, single layer of graphene, and then you have a plasma dump on an outside surface, and then a static dump on the inside surface, you've created locality, which and compression of the plasma surface that does not touch the surface.
That's possible, but you would have to have a gap in between because you're going to need space for each layer, right?
There wouldn't have to be a space between the aluminum and the graphene coating in the way my mind's working it out, because of the difference. You have a dielectric and then you have a semiconductor, okay? And then you have it's only an atom thick separating the two. If you run a negative charge outside of it, okay, and then you have a counteracting force pulling it toward it, you've compressed the plasma without it being able to, it's being repelled and conducted simultaneously.
I can't wait until you see my presentation, because you're basically just explaining it without me putting it out there. That's literally one part of the way the coil system works. There's 7 different instabilities in it to make it work. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. If one was gone, it wouldn't work. So like what you're saying, it does compress. It compresses the plasma in between each copper line. And as each line crosses, that's another form of compression. And as the energy crosses each other, because you're getting your EMF, and because I wrap it 180 degrees out of phase, you capture the back EMF from the EMF, and that creates that plasma that forces itself past each other in the dipotron instability. And all these little things that come together are like plasma moving in and around the wire that crosses each other, that amplifies at different separate node points and amplifies just at the very flow itself.
Now, from the material science point, in context of what you're saying, what immediately popped into my head is an aluminum cord copper plated wire with a graphene coating, because then you have the conductor, the semiconductor, and the dielectric, that would separate the forces, so when it rides, like in my head, that's sort of what's going on.
We should have talked last week. Nathan brought something up about coax cable. I did a test and I haven't wanted to release this, but you're just like making my brain light on fire.
And once you said I heard him talk about it, but once you said it, now I already know. It's the shielding.
So if you take a copper coil like that I build and many others, I'm not saying but you know what I mean. Okay, so to take one of my copper coils, your inner core of your coax cable is solid, right? So you attach your inner power to your inner solid core on your coax cable, and I collect power on the outside of my core. So I take that power and I put it on the outside sheathing. Let's just say I have no losses thus far on 150 feet. And I'm increasing the test to 800 feet because I have 800 feet of coax cable. And if I get absolutely no losses, my brain goes to the superconductivity in these coils and the geometrical shape is giving the ability to the coax cable to become as one unit and superconductive in itself.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. But you brought it up. I didn't want to bring it.
Look,
Sorry, it's just talking and it.
If you watch my stuff, you know I'm deeply esoteric. This is what they call, chaos magic is what it is. It's taking all the pieces and dumping them on the floor, and then and having such disorder. There you go. That's it. This is alchemical chaos magic.
Chaos out of order, right? Order out of chaos.
Right. It's exactly what it is. But the pieces in order as they are don't work. So what do? You knock the chessboard off the table, and then you put the pieces back where you want them to be. And that's been the nature of everything I've been trying to say is deconstructive, reconstructive. We know how to do the deconstructive. You know how to do the reconstructive. If you just understand then the differentials, it's all the differentials. Then the differentials create pressure in the system that you've reorganized the way you want is the outcome you're going to get continuously. Then you start modulating it. Now you have flow, and then you can have it flow the way you want it to. Apply this to your life, become happy and a millionaire. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to do that.
I'm a millionaire. You know what? Money, I've had money. I used to make $1,000 a day when I was younger. Money's overrated in my mind. All it was great.
I had money. I know.
Right now, I have everything I need. Do I have everything I want? No, but that's not what life's all about in my mind.
No. It's all about the pursuit of getting what you want. And that way it's satisfying when you get it,
Absolutely.
When you can snap it into existence, it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, I want to build certain things for people. I want to do things for people. I also want to do a little bit for myself. I want a quad. I want a hot tub, right? Simple stuff. But, that's stuff I want. It's not stuff I'm going to break my heart over not getting, right? It's not what the universe.
Gerald?
Well, just turn one of the coils into, what's his name? Man, so many names. Anyway, the guy from the Montauk Project.
Oh, which one?
The main guy, the one that actually did all the science and then wrote the books.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. I studied his work. The Montauk Project. He was also involved with the Philadelphia experiment.
It's directly. So, I was saying where I live, right? They did the Philadelphia experiment, and then they moved it over to Brookhaven National Labs. Okay, that's where they did the research.
Montauk.
3 miles from where I live.
Really?
Okay.
So
then they moved it to Montauk, like 30 miles from where I live.
Oh, so you're close to Montauk.
Oh yeah. I'm 10 miles away from Wardenclyffe,
Wow. I have pictures of Montauk and the generators that were smashed and all that. I'd love for somebody to go there and confirm whether or not those pictures are real. Because
which ones? Because I've been there many times.
The radar station there, where it's up on the hill, and you go into where the main control system is, and you can literally see the power line being cut that comes, I'm not sure, I guess from the generators into the panel, and you can see the fire, the burn split up the wall and everything, and it's got some radar equipment there, but it's mostly just the basic framing because it's been stripped, right?
Whatever you've seen is like I haven't seen the inside of that radar tower with my own 2 eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, but whatever you've seen is what it is. I mean, I know from like just talking to people and stuff that when they shut that place down, they came line after line after line of trucks waiting to fill all their tunnels in and stuff with solid concrete. And you have to ask yourself, yeah, it's a normal thing to do, to fill in, tunnels and vents and stuff like that of an underground facility that you're shutting down permanently. But the amount and for how long it went on for months, they were filling the entire underground system with cement for whatever reason. Okay, so this wasn't them closing off a couple of tunnels so you can't access it. This was them literally filling in the whole entire thing. And how many times has that been done? As far as I know, that's not something they do. So whatever was going on there was strange. But those bunkers are like sealed off like nobody's business. You can't get into them. But I've seen the bunkers with my own 2 eyes. I've seen the access ports with the concrete frigging. Literally, they put the manhole covers back on after they were filled up, and all the concrete is just spilling out of it. It was overloaded and then dumped back on. Crazy.
That is crazy. They found something. They didn't like what they found.
Yeah. But, the point of me going there was, if you want a hot tub, just make a coil and think it out of the hole.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, that's what they were supposedly doing. Who knows? Half of it was to sell books, and half of it, like the darker half of it was probably really going on, sadly.
Yeah, probably. Well, once they figured out how to, I wouldn't say control time travel, if the Philadelphia experiment had any truth or validity to it, then they figured out how to start playing with it. Who knows where they took it from there? That was almost 100
years. Did you catch what I said about the scalar vacuum yesterday?
No, I missed that. I'm only a quarter way through it, sitting on my.
Okay, so not to go back into all of it, but let's say you have directional scalar propagation. Okay.
Yeah.
And you intersect 2 directional scalar forms of scalar propagation.
Yeah.
Okay. It goes what I like to call the return to sender effect. Okay. You basically smash the 2 freight trains into each other, and now the whole entire freight train instantaneously collapses, so to speak, into waveform. That's what you have going on. But the point of intersection,
I could prove that.
The 0 point of the 0 point, okay, creates vacuum. All right. That vacuum sucks all the friggin' energy and starts dematerializing at that point. Okay. But not dematerializing in like what you might be thinking. Well, not you, but I'm talking slowly, more generally. Right. Dematerialization, not combustion. We're not talking about a bomb going off.
No,
we're not talking about things burning. We're talking about defragmentation of matter. Okay, at that point. Now, what's crazy is now that it returns to sender. All right, you either have to redirect it or capture it, but capturing it, if it's propagated over such a distance, is like an impossibility. So the best thing you could do is try to bounce it somewhere where it's not going to be super devastating. Now, here's where I had a preponderance of this is at that event horizon, we'll call it, I guess, right? At that event horizon of the 2 scalar planes meeting, if something is in resonance with the resulting wave pattern, okay, it will go back to where the projection is. Okay. It will dematerialize, but it will rematerialize where it's going. Okay. Only if it's in perfect resonance. Okay. It's the it's the incoherence and the dissonance of, you know, the frequency generated that leads to the dematerialization.
I know what you mean by that. And I can prove it up into the dematerialization point because I'm not using enough power to get that result. I think you need an excess to spin into the system to have that system give you that result, right? But I built something called the Thane-Hein replica, and then I built another version called the Peace Core transformer, and it's basically 2 vortex coils, one. So picture 3 transformer coils meeting in the sign of a peace sign, right? And then on the inside, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's a vortex coil on the top and a vortex coil on the bottom. And I spin the vortex up into the core from the bottom, and then I spin the vortex down into the core from the top, 2 separate coils smacking into each other. And I still get the back EMFs from those 2 vortex coils, and I'm getting all the power supplied to these 3 legs of this transformer. And those 3 legs of the transformer I get for free.
Okay.
So when you're talking about smashing the 2 scalars into each other, I'm doing that with these. They're 1 inch. No, these are 2.5 inch vortex coils, and they push scalar. One pushes it down, one pushes it up, and they meet in the middle. And where they meet, there's ferrite cores to absorb that energy. And then I take that energy and I run it into LED lights or
okay,
now.
So check this out. Now the last thing I want to do, okay, is say what I'm about to say later on today, go to the bathroom, and then come back and have somebody in my kitchen. But okay. You know,
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. But I already described it yesterday. So and with both you and Bernie here, I think this is bridging the gap of understanding, and I want to know what you think about this. Okay. If you run 2 scalar, okay, in resonant frequency, from the initial frequency in resonant. Okay, let me restructure this for everybody. So if you run a frequency that you're going to convert to scalar, okay, and that frequency is in resonance with a piece of quartz, okay, and you create your scalar and you have it inside, and I feel inside is important, okay, of a piece of terminated quartz, and it's got to be terminated. All right. Terminated meaning when, so when a crystal structure forms, if it reaches a natural point of an end where you've seen a natural piece of quartz that reaches a 5-pointed end. Okay, it's got right. So that's the termination. Okay. So it's got to be a piece of terminated quartz. All right. Okay. If you run your scalar wire into the terminated quartz, okay, and it's the constituent that created the scalar is in resonance with it, okay, that scalar will actually project through the quartz, okay, and because quartz, the crystal structure and its termination ends at that point, that's directional, okay. Now you could propagate the scalar out the tip of the quartz. All right. If you do this and you do it twice, aiming at each other, 180 degrees at each other. Okay. And then you start this reaction, you start to pull it back to the point where you're getting consistent hits on an oscilloscope. All right. If you then have coming into that from 90 degrees parallel to that reaction, if you then have something, okay, that is able to capture the energy being created, or not created, but being manipulated into the system. Okay, and then you close the circuit at the peak of consumption. Okay.
Yeah.
You are then no longer dealing with peaks. Okay, because what you're dealing with when you're dealing with the scalar interaction, the two scalar interaction, is you're dealing with a cold point, two hot points of return. Okay, if you intercept the hot points and then you wire it all together, now you've held the portal open. Okay.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
You've created a circuit of that. So if you have a kill switch, okay, where when it starts picking up the energy, if the kill switch hits at the top of the peak, where it switches from external propagation into it running the system to all of a sudden the system running the system, okay, because it's in resonance, it will continue. It will continue because it's looped itself.
Yep.
Okay. Now all of a sudden, what do you have?
You have a resonance. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Now, runaway resonance.
Because that system works off of the same principles as magnetism does in certain regards, if you want to run a parallel, the more you put in to a magnetic coil, the tighter it pulls, because the more the return is. The more you pump, the harder it sucks. The more you pump, the harder it sucks. Once you have a load on the bitch, it just sucks harder. Well, you put more load and it just sucks harder. And you put more load and it just sucks harder.
That's how you control it, is by using the load. Do you know what I mean? That's what
sucks harder.
Because everybody wants
system.
The load. Yeah.
Right. So the first phase is getting it into the zero drag load system. And then from there, you transfer into what you're talking about here, which is then pulsing it once it's in resonance or coherence to then extract.
Zero drag is resonance.
So you backtrack. You're to what I was saying earlier. Your material that you're making your initial scalar with, okay, the length of the system, then the material of propagation being quartz, it all being in resonant frequency with each other, and then you exploiting its high point to repower itself, and then then you could drag the portal open. You drag it open, and the more load, the more suck. The more load, the more suck. I wish that was real life. The more suck, the more load is really how it goes. But they have a hard time achieving that.
Yeah, you don't want me drawing circuits when you're saying stuff like that.
You know.
You're gonna lose it.
Oh,
y'all, the nastiest nerds I know, and I love it.
But you know what, though, Joe? You're not wrong, but I do it in the opposite way. I use the load to do the other. We'll say, okay.
Say it with a straight face, Gerald.
How about that Sheela Macabre?
I use the load to make the work happen. You know what I'm saying? That's how I control the scalar. Is the more load, is the more I can pull in, and the less load, you'll see so much, right? And it looks like tinkering. Then you put a massive load on it, and I'm pulling so much through. I'm blowing circuits and blowing this and blowing that. I finally figured it out, and now that doesn't matter. My circuit runs cold as I'm pulling a load. In fact, the more load I pull, the colder the circuit gets, and the colder the inside core of the coil gets. And that's what
and then go back to what you said before about the heat and temperature differential.
Yeah.
And you know, like it's all one. It's like, well, there you go. Well, you needed that. There it is. But this is doing something else other than that. But the whole thing is that once you have it to that point, it does it all.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, you could have a single coil. Like, at least, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, this isn't my area of expertise. Nothing is the area of my expertise. I don't know shit. But if you have a single coil, just by manipulating the impedance, the spacing, the diameter, the this, that, along a single run, okay, you could technically have a coil that has multiple effects, provided that you isolate it properly. Well, why wouldn't you be able to? Of course you could.
Yes, but I don't know if you get superconductivity out of it, because it really matters when it comes to your back EMF. And a single coil has a single line. And the more power you pump through it, the more electromagnetic force wants to feed back and heat up the line, right? Now, if you're using that as your heat component to your circuit, that might work. But I know what you're saying. That's why I wrap my coils 180 degree out of phase. So it's like this and then like this, so that when I pump power through that first line, this one captures all the heat and captures all that back EMF, which turns your primary or your first line into almost like a superconducting material. And as you do that through the whole system, it literally becomes a superconductor.
That makes total sense. Yeah, because right. It all has to do with whether you're trying to attract or repel, and the phase of, energy production that it's in.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's a field or whether it's components of a field that are just being separated out of the equation. It's just a lesser condensation of the charge. At that point, I don't think I articulated that well.
I know what you mean. It's more like the compression of the charge, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. I mean, so when you have the different charges, and that they have to be consolidated and compressed, it's that compression and that level of it, entering into that level of interaction that causes the next effect, is the point. So when you have static and you have plasma, when you have one and the other, if you want to think about it as like a recipe, so to speak, okay, if you the interaction and consolidation of the plasma and the static is a magnetic field, if you want to think about it as a recipe. It
takes your magnetic field and or you want to call it your static field, and it takes your magnetic field. I don't know, what do you call that? They're both the same, aren't they? Your static and magnetic. It depends on how you look at it, I guess, right?
The way I think about it, and again, I don't know. Like, this is only how I understand it. I don't know that it's correct, but like, if you're dealing with static, you're dealing with free positive charge. Okay. When you're dealing with plasma, we can say, you're dealing with free ionic charge, negative charge. Okay. So
what do you mean by that?
So when you so I want you to think about waves and alignment for a second, okay? And this is why I was saying the spacing yields different results, and it makes total sense, okay? So if you have two wires, okay, running parallel to one another, like that, right? And let's say for let me work this out in my head how I want to describe it. Okay, let's say that they have opposite directional propagation. Okay, so you have one running this way and one running that way, just the way that my fingers are pointed. All right. Let's call this the effect that you're going to get is going to be depending on how the propagation of the frequency is running through both these lines at the time. Okay, so the frequency is running above and under this line.
Yeah.
All right, and above and under this line.
Yeah.
Now, if you bring them close together, okay, like then you're going to have, because they're opposite running, you're going to have some deconstructive interference.
Yep,
and then you're going to have some constructive interference. Okay, and if you line the points and troughs up of these two lines, okay, what you're left with is I always like to call it a drop in a bubble, but in this case, you're only left with a drop. Okay, so you're left with or a bubble rather. So you're left with a negative charge. Okay, now if you bring them closer together, they reach total deconstructive interference. All right, where there's very little coming off positive and negative. All right, that's when you reach a scalar point. When you then pull it even closer, okay, at that point you're having negative deconstructive interference, and you're left with a positive charge, a static charge. It explains the interaction between the waves and the lines, why the distance is relevant, and what the outcome ultimately is. So when you have the bottoms of the trough deconstructing and you're only left with the top, you're left with one, static. When it's only the bottom, then it's plasma. When you bring them that close together where they're aligned properly, then you're getting scalar, which is why, anytime you want scalar, you want twist, you want repeating back on itself, you want it to sit there and line up in the coil frequency wise, basically right onto itself to null it and make it be like, how come this isn't doing anything?
Right.
I don't feel a static charge coming off of it. I can't measure a static charge coming out of it. There's no plasma production. Why doesn't this work? Well, that's because you've aligned the distance of the propagation. And obviously every little factor has what to do with it. It's not only the frequency, the reach of this is amplitude, So when you want to create those effects at different distances, the amplitude will adjust for that. So that's how I visualize it. That's how when Nathan was talking about the spacing of the coils, why that's all relevant. But that's also why there's an objective difference between a static charge and a plasma charge.
And the spacing of the coils, it matters how tight you pull the line when you're wrapping these coils. Like I pull it tight enough to almost cut my fingers, right? That way there's very little spacing between the two, and the tolerance is like it acts as one solid wire. Because it's so tight and tied together, it forms one shape. But there's I think there's 8 shapes in this one. But you wouldn't know it because it's so tight, it just forms a toroid, right? But that's because I'm pulling on the wire before I make my bend and make my turn. And then I'm pulling again. And then when I'm at the end, I'm wrapping it around my hook so I can pull in my other line and do the other side. So it's always tight, tight, tight. And I can't get it any closer than I already have. If I could, I would. But you're absolutely right. When they're close together, you're creating static. Then you're creating like the bubble, what some people like to think of as EBOs, right? I'm not so sure. It remains to be seen just as yet.
Well, you could get them closer, but you'd have to have your wire would have to be keyed.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that.
It would either be keyed or it would be at least it would have a plane at some point where you can get it that close.
I was thinking of doing it with square wire next, just to see if I can get it closer. But I kind of like the way the round wire has been turning out. It's a new test, right? Something to try.
Yeah, that's all. But the surface area just being the key to how close you could get it anyway. It's a stacking equation.
Yep, absolutely. And it creates capacitance. It creates spin because of the way the system itself is made. And that's the funny part. When you come down to spin of fields, people think it can't be done. This is not a solenoid, right? So I'll give another golden nugget out this morning. You guys are gonna love this. Maybe I shouldn't give this one out. Yeah, I got it. So think of it this way. When you're building a coil, you're building a series of bar magnets. And you're putting those together and you're amplifying your whole system by creating each magnet in series. And then you're canceling out the null zone of each bar magnet and pushing it into the middle of your coil.
Yeah, that's a good way to visualize it. Yeah.
It's kind of how the system is put together. So yeah, that's another golden nugget. Yeah, here's a kitty. One of the kittens. One of the strays.
Does she have a name yet?
This one's called Rocket.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, if you look at his face, he actually looks like Rocket from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's pretty cute.
Very cute.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I love this tech. I love experimenting with it. I love explaining it. It's become part of my life in a sense. It started out as a hobby and turned into craziness.
It's so hard. It's so hard to develop this train of thought, and then break that pattern. Like I feel like once you start circling into these realms of things, it's like once you realize that what you're doing here, like there's so much analogous stuff out there that you start relating it to everything, and then you realize after a certain point in time that it's all one and the same. It's crazy. It's like never ending.
It's all connected, but we don't see it as being connected. We see every system as separate, right?
The key to anybody that wants to understand this at a deeper level, if you're struggling, is your method of thinking. Everything in your life, like, think of as a individual puzzle, but here's the difference between making the connections and not, is before you even start building the thing, take all the edge pieces and throw them away. Complete the entire puzzle the opposite of how everybody else does. They all go edge first and then build in. Okay. What you want to do, you want to put the pieces together and realize that the puzzle on the outside, it might look finished. You put a frame on it and it looks beautiful on the wall and you can see it for exactly what it is. But you have to realize that all the other puzzles that you're building, you're going to realize at one point in time, wait a second, this entire thing snaps into the edge of that one. It's when you draw those lines, and you think that the puzzle's complete and you think that this is just what it is and that is just what that is. It's you've failed to see the big picture at that point. You never will, for that exact reason.
Well, I've been blessed in the sense where I don't have any electrical training. I got kicked out at the end of grade 11 for being, and it's an odd story, for being too smart. So I've learned everything from the back end. No electrical engineering. I could wire a house in my sleep, right? But that's not electrical engineering. That's electrical. That's like commercial, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to engineering, if I had gone to school, there is no way I would have found what I found. Forget it. If I had taken some academic course, theoretical physics, forget it. I would have been looking in totally the wrong area and I wouldn't have known what to see, right? But because I got the first coil in a dream and I started experimenting, and throughout time led to different arenas to look at, man, like you said, I did it from the back end in. Totally different than what an electrical engineer would. And I think that's the problem.
Absolutely. Anytime you're set to a bound of rules, you're going to stay, if you're like the average person just trying to, understand enough to get them by, and, everything else is just, okay, well, this is what I'm doing with it. This is what I'm making or earning with it or whatever. Well, then that's the relevance of it. It's the far and few in between that want to push the boundary of anything, and, unfortunately society, like we've said so many times, they've led the path of ostracization, of people that want to break that mold. The crazy thing is it's not, it's not how much you necessarily know about any one thing. It's about how many things you know about. You know,
Absolutely
if you
true.
have enough to have at least a baseline intelligent discussion on whatever given topic with whoever is bringing it up of all different sets of knowledge, you'll stand to learn a lot from those people, you know, if you listen still. But because you know more than just this one thing that you've dedicated your entire purpose to, you know, you start really seeing, oh, wait a second, you know, that's how I came to understand these things, you know, that we're talking about has nothing to do with how much content I consumed on this particular subject. It just had to do with having a baseline knowledge of all these different little random things, and then sitting there saying, oh, well, here it is. This is what I do. And, you know,
See, for me, it's not like it's my all end all say all kind of thing. For me, it was more like I was led into this. My life was completely 180, nothing like what it is now. And I don't know. I kind of look at it like we're led to things we're meant to complete or work on for others to complete. And in that sense, if I've learned something that others don't know, it's my obligation to tell as many people as possible so they can take that information and carry it on, or take that information and build upon it, right?
that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking, and you know, it's you know, if there's any moral to the story, it's just that try to understand things, you know, that you're trying to accomplish, but don't ever get so drawn in to thinking you know the answer, because even when you do, the question changes, you know, and if you don't pick up on the question that's changing and asking the right next question, then you've come off track, you know. And once you go off track, you'll never get to where you want to be. And that's whether it's this or that, you know, it could be anything that you're talking about.
There's one thing that has made me drive me since the day I was like, I can remember. So 6 years old, I would say, since somewhere, no, 5, since I was 5. I want the truth. That's it. That's all. I want the truth, no matter what it costs. Even if I don't freaking like it, I want the truth. So everything that I've done in my life, I apply that to it, and I just keep learning. You can't go wrong if you're learning, right?
But you'll never find the truth if you're not willing to remove yourself from your perspective.
Right.
That's the key too. Like, if you know, if anything, you know, you need to be able to lift away from yourself and see not only yourself, but the dynamic, you know, the everybody else, the everything else. It's that's what separates people, is when you get too hung up on yourself, or you think you're right, or this, that, all of a sudden, you know, it becomes incohesive, you know, incoherent and incohesive.
And I've said it before, I'm the first one to admit I'm wrong. If you show me I'm wrong, hey man, I'll apologize to everybody and I'll admit it, because all you're doing is teaching me, right? That's why I love being wrong. I learned something. That's my joy. I love learning.
Right. I think that I present myself, I hope, that same way. It's sort of like, you know, I think I know what I know, but I don't even know that it's true. You know, like, and it's that open-endedness of it that's like, if something I'm saying is wrong, please bring it to my attention. So I'm not about to sit there and take that as, like, you know, the word, but I'm going to add that into it and see where it fits, you know.
That's how you find the truth.
Well, welcome to how the mind puts together the puzzle, if you're in the right train of mind. Oh my God, Sheela. Literally the best. She's so smart.
I had to go upstairs and I missed the first part of this.
Hold on, it's about to get to the best part, though, Gerald.
Okay, but before you start that, am I correct to assume that she's created a 3-dimensional oscilloscope to look at waveforms or fields?
100%. You got it.
Okay.
And
It's funny. That's what I see in my mind.
in that,
I wish I could see it.
demonstrate the difference between certain waves when entered in 440 compared to 432, and it's just astounding.
Nice.
Another visualization that comes out of another angle of the harmonic, but or pentagram or five of them depending on the angle you're observing, which is a whole thing. So there's like a Lisa Jewish shape, which looks kind of like this X with a circle, which is another visualization that comes out of another angle of the harmonic, but or a pentagram or a five-petal flower is generally the five side. So yeah, so let's see. Music production tools actually, like for music nerds, music producers, there's a type of file that's called Scala. The Scala file is a list of ratios, and it could be any number of ratios, 2 ratios, it could be 20, it could be 100 ratios. It really doesn't matter. A Scala file is just a list of ratios that, alternative music producers use to make cool music. And so basically when you have this list of ratios, you take it and you put it into a plugin that allows you to generate a list of frequencies that are calculating that series based off of any base value. So you can put any base value in there, you put 512, you put 432, you put 333, and then it's going to calculate all the numbers, the ratios of that number, based on what ratios you put into that Scala file. So that's just an interesting little tidbit there. So these are the ratios I got from, so in the plasma gamification model, most of the rows have 32 total frequencies. Most, not the ones with the elements, of course, because there's no numbers on those, but most of the lines in the plasma gamification model have 32. So from line 11 to line 23, all the ratios between all of the numbers were the same. I didn't expect that at all. I didn't expect that at all. And, but from line 11 to line 23, all of the ratios were the same. And they already encode some of these sacred ratios, like the perfect fifth, 3/2. So I wrote the example of that of one of 20 or so calculations. 18.75 divided by 1250 is going to reduce to 1.5. So that's one example of like how to calculate a ratio between two numbers. So a lot of the numbers from the traditional Pythagorean 432 tuning system, a lot of those ratios are already encoded into the plasma gamification model with a lot more as well that I never seen before. And this was like a bombshell for me because every single number was remaining coherent. So this is a special set of ratios. All right, so now that we understand frequencies, geometries, and oscilloscopes a little bit better, now we can talk a little bit briefly about imprinting electromagnetic fields. So once you find a cool geometry that you like or that encodes some aspect of reality that you want to train with, you can now use it to imprint the electromagnetic or plasma field. So first thing you do is you can run the frequency. I have a splitter here. So I run the frequency through one through a torus to imprint to higher dimensional levels, and then one through the sound or the room audio speaker system. So you can imprint the geometries into the electromagnetic field using coils, And then you can encode the geometry into a tuned plasma field using a device like Quantify. So these are just two ways you can imprint the geometries into different layers of reality. So geometric forms are capable of modifying the